Dr. Calabria, industry's decision to invest in new housing is accumulation of many factors that we've discussed today. Input costs, impact on the return of investment, along with rent and sales prices. Regulations, taxes, and financing are all components of the calculation. Dr. Calabria, how does the overall state of the economy impact the decision to invest, and how can Congress support housing affordability without contributing to inflationary pressures?
Thank you, Senator Crapo. That's a terrific question. And let me, emphasize to clarify from something Senator Wyden raised. Just because you may be in a cycle doesn't mean you don't do anything. It just means you may do something different to focus on. When we tend to see changes in the cycle, we tend to see shifts where income burdens, people lose their job, people suffer income losses, and so you may have a different style of support in a weaker economy than you would have in a booming economy. But I do think we need to be concerned about, since, go back to Econ 101, since the number one constraint structurally in the housing market is a lack of supply, we need to be cautious about adding demand subsidies that simply run up prices, which is how we've gotten the inflationary pressures we face today. So we need to be cautious about how do we think about this in an economic sense so that we're actually achieving our objectives.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Watson, as mentioned in your testimony, LIHTC is an important tax tool to encourage investment in affordable housing. However, as you noted, there are ways to improve this credit and its administration and oversight. Could you just give us a review of the specific recommendations you have to improve the credit's efficiency so that Congress should consider that in future LIHTC legislation?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I think one major theme when looking at the credit's effectiveness is we really need to have a shared understanding of the baseline from the data of how the credit is doing and how it's actually connecting the credit with outcomes for low-income tenants and for folks who own those developments. And so I think we have a good base with what HUD is already collecting. There's a lot of great information there that's been leveraged in research and elsewhere. But we can really build on that, I think, by providing more granular data to be able to answer some of these questions about how the credit is doing and building on either reform efforts considered now or reforms in the future to ensure that we're maximizing the amount of benefit that's actually going to those tenants rather than all the folks who are in that process who are necessary, but we could be doing a better job of making more, passing through more efficiently.
Thank you. And Ms. Janot, do you believe that addressing affordable housing supply requires pro-growth tax policies more generally, in addition to housing-specific initiatives? And if so, can you discuss some of the recent proposals before Congress that could actually negatively impact the supply of affordable housing in the tax arena?
Sure. So absolutely, the private market simply cannot afford to provide housing in the amounts that we need it in the lowest income tiers and also in the middle income tier. So those tax incentives are incredibly useful. I was looking at some recent data from HUD that $8 billion annually is generated from the low-income housing tax credit in budget authority. That is critically important to offsetting what the true cost of developing that housing is and making it affordable for folks that need it.
And so are there tax policies that Congress is considering, or that you've seen proposed here in Congress that could actually undercut that?
Well, certainly anything that's going to adjust the tax rates will make a difference in both the use of the low-income housing tax credit. We saw a little bit of that happen when the tax rate was the corporate tax rate was adjusted downward. Now the market has made adjustments for that, but we're not seeing the full value of what the tax credit could be and could generate now as we had previously when the tax rates have dropped. So that is one issue that does impact the low-income housing tax credit.
All right, thank you. And finally, Mr. Walker, aside from the increases to LIHTC, are there any reforms to the program that would be helpful to you and fellow state housing authorities in administering the credit?
Thank you for that question. I think, stepping back and looking for opportunities to improve a 40-year-old program is always important to do, and Congress has done that a few times over the years. I think there's legislation speaking to the student rule to recognize that folks living in credit housing often need to go back to school or retool their skills, and so both HUD and the credit have two different definitions of the student rule. I think there's been testimony today about bringing things into alignment, but opening up that is an example of how we can improve the program. So I think there are opportunities to always look at doing that. Right now, because it's such a proven tool, I think the opportunity on the table is to make it the power tool that it needs to be.
Thank you. I see my time's up.
Tools and power tools. Okay, thank you. Senator Stabenow.